Today, we're going to be addressing the Bloodstone Villains. This gang is one of the oldest Bloods in Los Angeles. And though they weren't known for having the most numbers, the Bloodstone Villains are still one of the most deadliest and militant gangs to come out of the low bottoms. This gang, they have more than a few prominent figures, like the Notorious Reggie Wallace, also known in the streets as Sir Me, who was responsible for the Gable Bowling massacre, and were several gang wars, robberies, and much more gruesome activities in their history. This gang, they definitely have a story to tell. Yeah. All right. Welcome to Cali's Most Dangerous. Let's get into it.
This is an active shooter situation. We have multiple subjects down inside and outside Gable House.
Panic inside a packed bowling alley in Torrance, California.
Subject ran out the door of the parking lot, shooting in the parking lot also.
On January 3rd of 2019, the Gable House bowling alley in Torrance, California was filled with friends, family, and staff members having a typical night. Kids were playing arcade games, the adults were drinking, laughing amongst each other, and the overall vibe of the night, it seemed peaceful. Most would even say festive. But with the attendance of Reggie Wallace, also known as Sir Me, a notoriously known Bloodstone villain, all that would quickly change as the night progressed. That's because, along with Wallace and other Bloodstone members in the bowling alley, it was also a group of 4-pack gangster Crips members who were the mortal enemies of the Bloodstone Villains. It's alleged that shortly after midnight, a group of about 30 males and females of opposing sides started arguing with each other. This argument, it quickly escalated into multiple fights among the females. And with tensions already high, due to the females fighting, chaos in the bowling alley, and a bloody history among the Bloodstone Villains and the 4-pack gangster Crips, the males began to brawl as well. At this point, with multiple fights erupting amongst the gang members, civilians making their way towards the exit, and staff members having no idea how to handle the situation, the Gable House bowling alley was a complete chaos and disarray. But unfortunately, this was all just the beginning of the situation. Reggie Wallace was a known Bloodstone villain with a lengthy criminal record. Wallace, he was first convicted as a juvenile in 1989 for first-degree murder. In 1997, he was convicted as an adult of possession of a gun within a school zone and was convicted of assault with a firearm the following year. With that being said, he spent most of his life in the court system. In fact, Wallace had just been released 2 years prior to attending the Gable House bowling alley after serving 17 years in prison and was even still on parole. On the night of the brawl, with women screaming and the men shouting and throwing punches, the fights migrated around the Gable House bowling alley, when suddenly, Wallace emerged from a group of men, pulled out a pistol, and fired over 10 shots towards the opposing group, hitting a total of 7 people. 4 people survived, with 2 going to the hospital and another 2 seeking their own medical help. But sadly, 20-year-old Michael Radford, 28-year-old Aston Edwards, and Robert Meekins, who was also 28 at the time, were killed by a barrage of bullets. Edwards and Radford died near the front counter that split the bowling lanes on the north and south sides. Meekins, he collapsed on a small set of stairs near lanes on the south side. Wallace, he wasn't arrested or pursued that night. But the whole situation and the aftermath was recorded by both surveillance cameras and people who put out their phones.
Please just turn yourself in. I don't have my baby. And my grandson don't have his father, so I gotta go home and tell this baby, he's 5, that his daddy's not coming home no more.
On top of that, with this massacre occurring in Torrance, California, which is an area known for its minimal violence, this is also a situation heavily covered by the media.
I do not know who no Reggie Wallace is.
The mother of 28-year-old Aston Edwards, who was the second victim, says her son died in his cousin's arms.
I'm glad my son wasn't here by himself tonight.
The third victim was 20-year-old Michael Radford. The families say the 3 victims were friends whose memories were honored during a vigil tonight in which Little Princeton helped to raise money for their services.
He's my favorite daddy and I love him.
Stop this violence, because we're not going to get anywhere with this.
Learn to love each other, hug somebody, tell somebody that you love them.
During a televised conference with police and media, Torrance police chief said, "This is a tragic event of major proportions. We've never had an incident like this in the city of Torrance. And also, it's tragic. 3 people lost their lives. 4 people were shot. This is life-changing for so many people." Wallace was caught and arrested 2 days after the shooting near Koreatown. And during his interrogation with police, he said very little. But when he was jailed, several of his conversations with inmates were recorded and played for the jury. And they told a lot of facts that only made the case stronger for the DA. Deputy District Attorney Robert Song told the jury of 7 men and 5 women that Reggie Wallace was never involved in the fight that broke out at the Gable House Bowling Alley on January 19th prior to opening fire in the front entrance and then fleeing. Instead, Song played jailhouse audio recordings in which Wallace, who's now 51, allegedly told another inmate that he had spotted rival gang members at the bowling alley that night, and that he picked a spot underneath the camera near the front entrance because he thought it would keep him from getting captured while shooting into the crowd. He then allegedly told the inmate that he didn't realize that there were 4 or 5 security cameras inside that were facing his direction. The DA made a strong case that the shooting wasn't random at all. It had nothing to do with the brawl. Song said the defendant saw his enemies there, quickly planned to murder these people, and executed that plan. Radford's mother, Michelle Miller, told Wallace, "You tore up 3 families." She noted that her son wasn't alive long enough to be on hand for his daughter's first birthday, and said that she wanted to ensure that Wallace, he doesn't ever get to walk out of prison again.
Well, I don't see how I'm gonna bury my own kid. Ain't supposed to bury your own kid. Well, I guess we'll wake up in the morning and be a big dream, hopefully.
In the end, through the surveillance, the jail audio recordings, and witness testimonies, Wallace was convicted for the deaths of Michael Radford, Ashton Edwards, and Robert Meekins, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Bloodstone Villains and the 4-pack gangster Crips war with each other has always been this intense. And sadly, Michael Radford, Ashton Edwards, and Robert Meekins lost their lives due to Reggie Wallace's hatred for the 4-pack gangster Crips. The crazy part is this insane situation is only one of many stories coming from the Bloodstone Villains. And today, we're addressing it all. Danger rating for the Bloodstone Villains. The Bloodstone Villains are going to receive a danger rating of a 9.3 out of 10, based off of the gang's long history in the low bottoms. Throughout the years, this gang has made headlines in the media due to how ruthless a lot of its prominent members have moved. Yeah, y'all heard one story. Reggie Wallace was a straight demon, but there's so much more we gotta cover. And bruh, let me just warn you now, this shit gets real. The Bloodstone Villains have engaged in multiple wars, which have resulted in several shootings, drive-bys, setups, murders, but even worse than that, it's not just gang members losing their lives. Even civilians have fell victim to the gang. Daryl Gatewood, Anthony Wayne Simon, and Simon's brother, Anthony Charles, were really close. They partied together, played sports together, and rode their motorbikes together pretty much every weekend. The 3 friends had regularly rode their bikes to a bicycle shop on Central Avenue to get parts without any issues. But on August 23rd of 2014, the 3 men were en route to the bicycle shop, heading north on Central Avenue, when Simon saw a group of young men and women congregated near a wall and a restaurant parking lot at the intersection of Central Avenue and 54th Street. The spot was a known hangout for members of the Bloodstone Villains, or BSVs, but the group didn't bang, so they didn't think anything of it. Charles and Gatewood rode through the intersection, but Simon got caught at the stoplight. At the light, 2 men approached Simon and asked, "Hey, where you from?" Simon, he interpreted the question to be asking if he had any gang affiliation. So he responded that he wasn't from nowhere, meaning he had no gang ties. The light turned green and Simon continued to the bike shop. The 3 friends, they later returned from the bicycle shop and went on that same route, going south on Central Avenue. As the men approached the same intersection near the wall, they slowed down at the stoplight. Simon saw a man wearing red running across the street from a group of people standing in the parking lot. The man had something in his hand, which Simon initially thought was a bottle that he intended to throw. As the stoplight turned green, Gaywood accelerated through the intersection. The man in red, he waited for Gaywood to pass by, then extended his arm and pointed a gun in Gaywood's direction. He then shot Gaywood 3 times in the back from about 25 feet away. Gaywood immediately falls off his bike and lay motionless. After shooting Gaywood, the gunman approached Simon. Simon stopped his bicycle, put his hands up, and looked directly at the shooter and said, "I don't bang. We don't bang." As they remained face to face, the gunman fired twice directly at Simon. One of the shots hit Simon in the leg and he flipped off his bicycle. From the ground, Simon saw the gunman running northbound on Central Avenue. Simon survived, but Gaywood, he unfortunately died from his gunshot wounds. Surveillance video played for the jury showed a man wearing a white shirt and red sweatpants, standing with the group next to the parking lot wall. The man could be seen on the video running across the street and firing at the 2 bicycle riders, as the rest of the group scattered. The video, it also captured another man from the group by the wall running towards Gaywood's bicycle, picking it up, and riding away with it. The police weren't able to find the gunman after he fled and never recovered the firearm or Gaywood's bicycle. But because the gunman was seen running up Central Avenue to 52nd Place, the police concluded that he may have hidden on one of the properties on 52nd Place. Los Angeles police detective Jose Casadelas investigated the shooting. And within several weeks of the shooting, Casadelas created a 6-pack photographic lineup that included Tyson Jordan, a man who lived on the block of 52nd Place where the gunman may have hidden, who had previously been arrested. When Simon was shown a lineup that included Jordan, Simon identified Jordan as looking like the gunman. However, when Casadelas showed the same set of photographs to eyewitness Debbie Pinker, she immediately recognized Jordan as a high school classmate and stated that he was not the shooter, and stated that she would have recognized him right away if he had been a shooter. Casadelas' interview with Pinker, along with his interview with Jordan, helped convince him that Jordan was not the shooter. Casadelas then received information that a Bloodstone Villain member who went by the moniker Deuceface was involved in the shooting. He then subsequently learned that Deuceface's real name was Arshawn Webb. Casadelas then put together another 6-pack photographic lineup that included Webb's photograph. After several witnesses identified Webb as a shooter from the lineup, he was then arrested on December 15th of 2014. But when police searched Webb's residence, they found no physical evidence tying him to the shooting. Still, there were several other factors that eventually led up to him being suspected as a shooter. One big one was a videotaped interview with Jones. Jones lived in the neighborhood where the shooting occurred, and he knew Simon from riding bikes together as well. He arrived at the scene minutes after the shooting and spoke briefly to Simon. Casadelas interviewed Jones on November 3rd of 2014. He testified that Jones came forward to speak with him after sending a flyer asking for information about the shooting, and Jones was cooperative and forthcoming. At the beginning of the interview, Jones, he put up a photograph of Webb, whom he knew only as Deuceface, on his phone and said Deuceface was involved in the shooting. Jones stated that he had shown a photograph of Webb to Pinker and she identified Webb as the shooter as well. Also, when Jones viewed the surveillance of the video shooting, Jones stated that the man wearing red pants and a white shirt looked like Deuceface. Jones also told Casadelas that 3 weeks earlier, he overheard Deuceface talking to a member of his gang about the shooting. Jones heard Deuceface say, "It's just gonna get hot over here." Deuceface then said, "I had to lay a nigga down," what Jones understood to mean kill somebody. On top of all that, there was also a lot of gang evidence which further indicated Webb as a member of the Bloodstone Villains. Evidence was introduced that Webb frequently posted on Facebook about his allegiance to the Bloodstone Villains. He also had gang tattoos on his body, including the letters BSV across his chest. The prosecution's gang experts opined that Webb was a BSV member. They presented a hypothetical mirroring and the facts of the shooting. The prosecution's gang experts testified that the crimes were committed for the benefit of, in direction of, or in association with the criminal gang, with the specific intent to promote or further assist in the criminal conduct by the gang members. He also testified that the gang lingo to lay someone down is to shoot them or sow them. Due to all the witness statements, surveillance evidence, and gang evidence, the jury found Webb guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, attempted premeditated murder, and unlawful firearm possession. And the court sentenced Webb to 25 years to life, doubled under the 3 strikes law, plus 25 years to life for the firearm use enhancement. Man, rest in peace to Daryl Gatewood. Bro was just trying to do what he loved with his friend. And unfortunately, he lost his life in the process. And even though this is truly sad, it shows the ruthless ways of the Bloodstone Villains. I mean, to get killed and robbed just for passing through a street? It doesn't get any more low bottoms than that. But to truly understand the Bloodstone Villains' brutal ways, we have to get into who these guys are. Who are the Bloodstone Villains? The Bloodstone Villains, commonly spelled BSV, are primarily the African-American street gang located on the east side of South Central Los Angeles. The Bloodstone Villains, they've been active since the late 1960s. The neighborhood spreads from 50th Street to Slauson Avenue, around Hooper Avenue, which is the center of their territory, which is also located in one of Los Angeles' most dangerous areas, known as the Low Bottoms. And trust, this area is just as grimy as it sounds, with numerous murders, gang wars, and drug kingpins coming out of the Low Bottoms. Yeah, that's why the Bloodstone Villains is grimy, cutthroat, and slimy. That's how you gotta be when you coming out of East. Bars, nigga. Nah, because of this, the Bloodstone Villains are known for being one of the most militant and deadliest gangs in the area. The crazy part is, like the Swans, compared to other gangs, they only have around 200 members, so they aren't that big. When it comes to cliques, they have 2 main ones, 52nd Street and 56th Street. There was a clique called 57th Street, but it's mostly composed of OGs. Today, they don't have a presence in the streets. Also, recently there have been some new cliques popping up as well though. The 2 previous cliques though, they're legendary when it comes to the gang street politics. And with them being one of the first gangs to add the Blood moniker to their title, they have been at war since basically the foundation of this gang. The militant means of operation has been making headlines for years too, even appearing on the Made in America documentary, as well as the Rep Your Set documentary, which displayed numerous gangs in their known areas as the members talked about what it's like to be members of a gang.
I'm a freaky mother. I like drinking gin and juice, pop, ecstasy, f***ing all type of getting my up and feel like a real stone trooper, blood. That's how I like to feel, homie. But when you take me out of that mode right there, I got to get you, blood. I got to get you, homie. You know? I ain't one of the most set-tripping ass bloods, though, homie. I'm a Bloodstone member, and I got love for the homies I got love for. But if I got love for you, in your hood, or wherever, fuck you, nigga.
In addition, the gang's activities have led to several gang injunctions and raids on the Bloodstone Villains. Yeah, the Bloodstones have always been targeted by the cops. That's because, from the foundation, they've been known for terrorizing their ops. Bars, nigga. One injunction in July of 1996 saw the arrest of 22 members of the Bloodstone Villains. The arrest, they capped a 3-month investigation into the activities of the Bloodstone Villains, whose members were allegedly headquartered in a rundown Central Avenue apartment, using it as a base for illegal activities. Suspects arrested were booked on a range of charges, from drug possession, spousal battery, robbery, and attempted murder. In one location, police said they found a sleeping baby with drug money stashed in a plastic bag underneath his head. At the foot of the baby's bed was a diapers bag. Inside the bag was crack cocaine. Police said the suspects terrorized Latino residents, stealing money away from them and getting away with it because many of the victims were in the country illegally and afraid to report the thefts. It's a common problem, said Detective Greg Knight, who worked the case for 3 months. These people get robbed all the time, and they don't report it. We talked to the people about it, and once we did, we said, enough is enough. We need to take care of this. In one case, 2 suspects approached a pair of Latino men who had just bought beer, robbed them, and then shot them in the back as they ran away, McKnight said. We're all scared, one woman said, who works in a nearby market. They had a shotgun on the roof the other day, and they were just shooting it. In addition to the arrest, police seized several pounds of marijuana grown in the yard of one house and recovered a small amount of crack cocaine from the Central Avenue building. Many of the suspects were armed. The police, they confiscated 19 different types of weapons, including handguns, shotguns, and a semi-automatic weapon, along with many rounds of ammunition. And trust, all this shit is still minor compared to what the Bloodstone Villains are known for around Los Angeles and beyond. But to address it all, we have to get into the history of these guys. History of the Bloodstone Villains. Formed around 1968, the group growing from the Five Deuce Boys and eventually calling themselves the Bloodstone Villains have an in-depth attachment to Los Angeles gang history. That's because they're one of the oldest African-American gangs in the city and one of the first Bloods in the city as well. The founder of the gang, Michael Bowie, also known as Ivy Jack, grew up on the east side of South Central Los Angeles in an area known as the Low Bottoms. Originally, him, the Snell family on 57th, and his posse were a group of teenagers protecting their area from other gangs. Going by the East Side Villains originally, they didn't start off as a gang. In the beginning, they started out as a small resistance against the Crips. This was because in the 1970s, the Crips had already distinguished themselves and began to force or bully people into being a part of their growing faction. These means of operations came with some groups that folded and became Crips, but it was also met with a lot of opposition from groups who stood up to the Crips, groups like the Stone Villains. And while they have similar names to other gangs in Los Angeles, they are known to stand alone in terms of alliances with other gangs. For example, the Bloodstone Villains are not attached to any Stone gangs. So the Black P Stones and other gangs with the Stone name are not in the same Stone umbrella. Of course, it's all still Bloods, but they're all different Stones. And each gang stands in their own accord. Rivals and allies.
We beefing with everybody right now, homie. You know what I'm saying? We got 4 dummies, 4 traps, Avons, bubblegums, Peptos, sometimes more weak-ass Mexicans, the Big Macs. It don't matter. We war with anybody. We Bloodstones. We rolling the east side, homie. Belongs to us, Villain Bros.
On May 27th of 2007, Nicholas Wilson, known by the street name of Type, rode his bicycle in the neighborhood of 49th Street and Hooper Avenue to drop off some games at a friend's house. En route, as Wilson rode on 48th Street, he noticed a couple of male Hispanics on the street. One of them, Omar Barea, was a member of the graffiti tagging crew, EBK. Barea indicated that he and several others, including Aaron Romero, also known as Glib, a VOH tagging crew, saw Wilson as he rode on 48th Street. Barea said that as Wilson rode past him, Wilson laughed and made a hand gesture at him. He indicated that Wilson was from a rival tagging crew. Barea stated that Wilson rode past him again a few minutes later, and Morel, Barea, and the others chased Wilson. According to Wilson, after he dropped off the games, he went back the opposite way, back down 48th Street. He said they attempted to take Wilson off the bike, but couldn't get him off because he was riding too fast. He said, I kind of swerved to avoid a crowbar coming towards my face. One of the men also struck Wilson with a crowbar, but he managed to stay on top of the bicycle. While a few of the men continued to chase Wilson on foot, Romero got on his bicycle and rode after Wilson. Near 51st Street, Romero finally caught up with Wilson and he rammed him. Wilson and Morel, they got off their bikes and they began to fight. According to Wilson, Romero pulled out a knife and attempted to slash him with it. Wilson then saw the others running towards him, so he abandoned his bike and ran away. As he was running away, Wilson heard a few of them saying, "Stop being afraid, and this is DOH." Barea picked up Wilson's bicycle, and rode it back towards 48th and Hooper. After he escaped, Wilson, he walked on Hooper Avenue. On 53rd Street, a large blue Chevy truck approached him from Central, going towards Hooper Avenue. Known Bloodstone Villain member DeReese Porter was driving the truck, and 3 or 4 other African-American men were also in the truck. Wilson knew Porter by the name of Kojak, and had seen him around the neighborhood, but never had any direct contact with him. Wilson told Porter that he had just been jumped, and his bicycle was taken. So Porter said, "Let's go get it back." So Wilson got in the back of the truck with the other men. Right after that, Porter drove the truck on Hooper and stopped on 48th Street. According to Wilson, when the truck stopped, everybody got out of the truck and started fighting with all the other guys from DOH, including Morrell and Barrera. Wilson saw Morrell jump on Porter and stab him in the head with the knife. Morrell used that same knife that he had earlier when he tried to stab Wilson. He also observed Porter bleeding and holding his head. That's when someone yelled, "Bust on that fool! Bust on him!" At that point, all the guys from DOH began running away. Wilson, he heard 4 or 5 shots towards the individuals that were running away, but did not see who fired the shots. After the shooting, Wilson noticed that Morrell, he got hit and fell between the fence. He said Morrell was still running away when he got struck. Unfortunately, Morrell died as a result of the gunshot wound. Morrell was also struck by a shot in the back and fell to the ground. Wilson then said he stood there for about 3 seconds, picked up his bicycle, and he left. As he got on his bike, Wilson saw Porter's truck being driven away from the scene as well. Los Angeles police detectives responded to the area of the intersection of 49th Street and Hooper Avenue on the day of the shooting. At the intersection, there was a business by the name of Mimo's Garage. Detectives spoke with the owner of the business and were given permission to view footage from the video surveillance system of the business from May 27th, which showed the whole situation playing out. On June 17th of 2007, Los Angeles police detective Dean Alcaraz and his partner Officer Merlin Gomez noticed a Dodge truck parked in an alleyway near Steve Lee Avenue in Los Angeles, California. At that time, the officers had an ongoing problem with vehicles parking in alleys and obstructing driveways and carports. The officers, they originally intended to cite the truck for a parking violation. Prior to doing so, they conducted a warrant check of the license plate, which revealed that the vehicle was one in connection with the murder warrant. The officers, they then waited and watched the vehicle for several hours. After about 3 hours, they saw a male, later identified as Porter, open the door with the key, get into the truck, and appear to start it before driving away in it. Officer Gomez requested backup and they followed the vehicle to Nicollet and Coliseum, where it came to a stop and made a right turn on Coliseum. After backup units were in place, Officers Alcaraz and Gomez initiated their red lights. That's when the vehicle then sped up, failed to stop at several stop signs, and sideswiped the car. The truck traveled another 150 yards, but there was a bus coming northbound, and there were also a couple cars double parked, so he basically got boxed in. The officers, they then exited their vehicles and engaged Porter in a foot pursuit through 2 apartment complexes. Porter scaled 2 fences and jumped into a carport next to the apartment, but he was eventually caught by the officers. The officers returned to the carport to ascertain who owned the carport. When he searched the area, the officers found a fully loaded revolver in the back area of the carport, directly where Porter would have landed after he scaled the fence. The gun was found hidden behind some wooden planks. After Porter was arrested, Officer Alcaraz asked him if he belonged to a gang, and he said, yeah, Bloodstone Villains. When asked what he was called, he said, Kojak. In the end, due to ballistics evidence from the gun, several key witnesses and their testimonies, and also cop statements, Porter was charged and convicted of murder and sentenced to state prison for a total of 122 years to life, without the possibility to parole. Yeah, this incident was from the result of tagging crews, picking on associates of the Bloodstone Villains. When it comes to actual gang members and their enemies though, these stories get a lot more gruesome than that. And trust, these guys have a long list of enemies they're known to go to war with. The Bloodstone Villains have had more than a few rivals and enemies, and even a few allies who have turned enemies. When it comes to allies, they've always had close relationships to most of the Bloods in the area. For example, there's an allegiance called the Bloodstone Villains, which include themselves, the Rolling 20 Outlaw Bloods, and the Rolling 30 Bloodstone Pyrus. Often, you hear the term 20s to the 50s in reference to their alliance. And even though they have close ties with other gangs around Los Angeles, like the Bounty Hunters and the Different Lane Bloods, that's pretty much it when it comes to allies. But the list of enemies is much longer. North of the Villains are the 4-pack gangster Crips, the Palo Bishop Bloods to the east, the Avalon gangster Crips to the west, and the East Coast neighborhood Crips to the south. And all these gangs are known rivals of the Bloodstone Villains. And with this gang's militant means of operation, they have a history of intense gang wars with each of these gangs. In addition, they have a lot of other enemies as well, like the 10-9 Gangster Crips, all factions of the Hoovers, the 4 Deuce Gangster Crips, the 4 Treys, and the 4A Gangster Crips, as well as the Playboy Serenials. But one of the biggest rivalries that's rung bells around Los Angeles is definitely gonna be with the Pueblos. Beef with the Pueblo Bishop Bloods. Davion McClellan and an unidentified male were riding bicycles down Hooper Avenue near 55th Street in Los Angeles one evening. This area was claimed by the Bloodstone Villains. McClellan, he was a member of the rival Pueblo Bishop Bloods. As they were riding their bicycles, McClellan and his homie encountered Michael Smith and Bloodstone Villain member Kenneth Corbett walking along Hooper Avenue. Either McClellan or his companion called out, "So whoop," indicating that he was a member of a gang affiliated with the Bloods. Smith and Corbett turned around and gave him a head nod and kept pushing. But seemingly coming out of nowhere, McClellan started shooting at him, firing about 6 shots in total. After the shooting, Corbett and Smith ran away from the scene. Neither of the two had been hit by the bullets, but one bullet, it entered a nearby backyard, striking and killing 22-month-old Joshua Montez and his great uncle who was carrying him. McClellan also fled the scene, but he was caught shortly after. And in the end, he was sentenced on the murder of 2 counts of life without the possibility of parole, plus 25 years to life for the gun enhancements. There were plenty of cases I could have found about the Bloodstone Villains and the Pueblos going to war. But I told that just to give an insight on how these deadly wars could even victimize the people who absolutely have nothing to do with it in the first place. Rest in peace to Joshua. At just 22 months old, he didn't even get a chance to make it to his 2nd birthday. That shit's sad. This incident, it occurred almost 10 years ago. But the war with these 2 gangs has been going on way longer than that. The war with the Bloodstone Villains and the Palo Bishop Bloods is a combination of complicated, sadness, and a lot of confusion. The reason for this is because these 2 gangs, they used to be close, damn near family, with the 2 gangs being allied with each other. In fact, they once referred to a relationship as the Villain Pueblos, or Pueblo Villains. They were so tight that they damn near did everything together. The Villains, they attended parties, get-togethers, meetings, and other types of functions in the Pueblo del Sol projects, and vice versa. It was always mutual love on both sides. It was common to see graffiti on sidewalks, curbs, and other city properties, which represented the alliance called the PBSV, Pueblo Bloodstone Villains. But all this quickly changed in 1998. On that night, allegedly a member of the Pueblo Bishop Bloods murdered a known Bloodstone Villain member by the name of Do Dirty, execution style, doing a drug deal. However, an LAPD officer and gang expert said the Pueblos and the Bloodstone Villains have been feuding since the 1980s. So the exact cause of the feud is disputed as well as the date. Y'all let me know in the comments what do you guys think the source of the beef is. Even though the exact cause isn't known, the hatred they have for each other can be seen on both sides. Prominent figures. The Bloodstone Villains are one of the oldest blood gangs in Los Angeles, and they've had more than a few prominent members who have made the gang one of the most feared and respected. But during my research, I found a list of members who lost their life for banging. A few of them include Rodney, also known as Bozy, Do Dirty, Jesse James, Baby Knot, Lizard, Domino, Tacoma, Lil Sleep, Slow Mo, Trina, Toya, Pookie, Donald Hayes, also known as Don Capone, or Don D, who was shot and killed in a car on 57th Street and Compton Boulevard by Keith Edward, also known as Kato, on April 5th of 1988. It's also Droopy D, General Dog, Michael Bowie, also known as Icy Jack, who's considered the founder of the Bloodstones, who passed on September 5th of 2001. It's also OG Big J, Lil Mank, P-Dog, Popeye, Gruesome, S-Man, Smokey, and OG Rooster. Yeah, rest in peace to them. And y'all let me know in the comments if any other members who are no longer with us. Let their names live on. Also, they have a long list of respected members who have made the Bloodstone Villains one of the most feared. Some of them include Tank, Swanee Fly, Bone, Xavier, Bobo, Gloves, B. Capone, Six Shakur, also known as Shady Eyes, and Scarecrow. In addition though, they've had more than a few rappers over the years who put in work for the gang. It was a group called the Bloods and Crips that featured members of the Bloodstone Villains. Some big songs that came from them is Don't Stress Me Out, and another is What It Do. Another rapper is Junior Lays, who's been rapping for more than a few years at this point, and is featured on a Street TV interview where he gives some first-hand insight on what it's like to be from his area. Y'all definitely tap in when y'all get a chance, and let me know if there's any other rappers I might have missed. Current state of the Bloodstone Villains. The Bloodstone Villains stand as one of the most feared and respected gangs on the East Side. But recently, due to changes in demographics and constant wars and losses due to lengthy prison terms, the gang's numbers has not been as deep compared to when the gang started. But don't get it confused. A lot of prominent members still around, and more than a few foot soldiers, this gang is still thriving and putting fear into their enemies. In fact, this gang, they've grown to the point so they have a big presence in different states as well. You can find Bloodstone Villains in Louisiana, New York, Tennessee, Little Rock, Arkansas, St. Louis, Kansas City, Maryland, and Houston. In fact, Houston-based Bloodstone Villain member Montrell Burley was arrested for the killing of BTB Savage.
Who opened fire killing a man last week on Mid Lane near River Oaks. The gunman, identified as 40-year-old Montrell Burley, he's charged with killing a rapper sitting in a white Mercedes. Burley, however, still on the run along with another suspect in the shooting.
Entry along with his fiancée were able to take down the robbers, allegedly killing one in self-defense. And she says a recent blog appearance by her son ramped up the pressure to retaliate against him and kill him after he talked about the incident in San Antonio. But it was on March 30th when Ward says her son called her predicting his death at a restaurant with people she believes were part of the plot to kill him.
But y'all tap in also and let me know if I'm missing your state, man. Rep for your state. That's it for the Bloodstone Villains. Y'all got any crazy stories about these guys? Any close calls? Did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong? Y'all let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It goes a long way. Y'all stay safe and dangerous out there.